Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I am so blessed and honored to be here today with all of you and Christian Hall, the Global Mobility Advisor at Itron. What's up, Christian? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. How are you?
Dude, I'm awesome, man. We've got an amazing show today, and I say that all the time, but I really mean it today because you're bringing some real actionable stuff around immigration, around green card policy, stuff that people can take back to their companies and really impact the way that they do things. And I'm looking over it and I'm learning stuff just like reading some of these notes here. Christian, I mean, this is really good stuff here. I mean, do you have an immigration background, or is this something you just kind of learned as you went along?
Yeah, it's actually since I joined Itron, and it seems recently, but I guess it's been 7 years now. I've kind of taken on immigration, and wow, it's really evolved just in the last couple of years. A lot of it was more tied to H-1Bs and just transferring visas, but now the green cards certainly have taken a domination in my day.
And I want to talk about why that is, but I also want to welcome everybody that's checking in on LinkedIn. Hit that like button, smash that like button, send some love out there. I want to know who you are, where you are. We give shout outs in the beginning. We're also going to take questions as well. So if you've got Christian questions, let us know. If you want to know about, his program, maybe some program design elements, or just get his opinion on green card and immigration stuff, please throw those in here and we will get to all of those. And I want to know why immigration has become so hot for you. You mentioned it's kind of become an area of focus over the last few years. Why is it so strategically important right now?
From us, and to answer kind of both questions, we saw a big increase in the last couple of years, mostly with the previous administration. There's a lot of high anxiety in our population, and they wanted more of a sense of security that they had a place here, not just at Itron, but in the U.S. So we started to see an uptick in employees go to their managers and asking, hey, what's Itron's policy as it relates to company-sponsored green cards, and how do I go about getting one? So it really changed over the course of the last couple of years to being something I did maybe 2 or 3 times a year, to getting 15 to 20 requests in one quarter.
That's wild. So it really became, it seems like
change.
it really became kind of a strategic talent acquisition tool.
That's exactly what it morphed into. It was something where more and more often when recruiters were reaching out to me about, usually it was, transfer questions, what visa are they on? How quickly can they start? It became more centric on, when do we start the green card process? My employee has an I-140. When do we start? When can we get him an I-140 as well?
So and listen, I should be more smart about these things, but I-140 sounds like a highway to me. What is an I-140?
So typically, I mean, that's the biggest milestone at the front end of the green card process. And typically, once an employee has gone through that process, which takes about a year or so just to file the application, they are essentially have a place in line for a green card in the U.S. Some countries, that place in line is much longer. For example, if you're coming in from Brazil, it might just be a year, and you're immediately able to get your green card. Where countries like India or China, they're taking 8 to 10 years that they have to wait for their green card once their I-140 has been approved.
We got somebody from Brazil here too. Let's see, Jana Shazanowski, Team Glomo. Hello from Rio, Brazil, everyone. What's up, Jana? It's good to see you. We got people checking in. I'm going to go through, give a couple shout outs here. Hey, also, if you're watching this right now, do me a favor, tag an immigration person because I think it's going to get really kind of technical and kind of interesting for some people. So Jana, do me a favor, tag Gabby Bachhuber out there, tag Roman Zelichenko, tag an immigration person that might want to kind of nerd out on some green card stuff here, because the conversation gets really cool when those folks get involved. Ray Abbott checking in from Vancouver. Nice. So far, there's 3 countries so far. Let's see how many we get. Mike Quigley in the Bay. What's up, Ace Relocation? Good to see you, Quigley. Stacy Huff. Looking forward to the show out in Pittsburgh. What's up, super producer Stacy in the house? Christina, back in chilly Pittsburgh. Christina, were you in Mexico? Where were you? Let us know. Hope your family's doing all right. Praying for you out there. Kathleen Baker, hello, Christian. Nice to see you. There you go. Raphael, hello from Chicago. What's up in the Shy? Raphael, it's good to see you. Mike Falia, greetings from Southern California. Happy International Women's Day to all the great women making our industry so great. Throw a little heart and an applause out there for the women in the industry. Good call out, Mike. Happy International Women's Day. I should have led with that. Jeez. You know what am I doing? I'm working hard. I'm trying, Christian. Feeling great at the MSC in Orlando. What's up, Tim? Shout out to all our fans out there in Orlando. The I-140 sounds like a highway to me. Best immigration joke ever. Thank you, Elena. Thank you.
That was pretty funny.
Thank you. I'm just trying. Greetings from Phoenix. Teresa Pope in the house. Juliana Ruiz. What's up? Yes. Jessica Cook. Shout out to the ladies. Nice. It's like a mixtape. Hey, Christian. Great to see you. That's from Diane Ayers. Very cool. Awesome. All right. So we're going to get into the immigration stuff. And I want to ask you, you talk a little bit about the evolution of green cards, almost coming to becoming a talent acquisition tool. And I'm curious, it went from something you did a few times to something you do 15 or 20 of in I think you said a quarter. Maybe you said a month. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that because the word got out that this was an option? Or is this something that your TA people started to market to the talents that were coming on board? Why did this pick up so much steam in your organization?
That's a great question, Bennett. And really our answer to that was to go out and do a benchmark and see, what are our competitors doing? As we're competing for these highly skilled workers, we want to make sure that our offers are competitive, that our policies are competitive. So that's what we did. We used our immigration firm and we reached out to some of our competitors and just looked at tech firms as a whole and just said, what are you doing as it relates to employee green cards? When are you initiating them? And we took our feedback from there.
What did you find when you went to the market to do a benchmark? Because all these benchmarking sessions at ERC and everything, they're super popular, but they're always behind closed doors and they're corporate only. And we don't know, us non-corporate folks out here, we don't know what goes on in the benchmarking. So tell us what the benchmark says.
Well, so our benchmark found that all three of the companies that we looked at did have green card policies in place. They range from 1 to 2 years from the time the employee came on board. We also found that 2 of those 3 had a repayment agreement incorporated into their green card program. So
when you say repayment agreement, I know relocation repay back agreements are usually 2 years. Maybe the first year is prorated. What is it like for a green card repay back agreement?
It's very much the same, Bennett. And we have a similar repayment agreement for our relocation. And we kind of mirrored that over to the immigration. Unfortunately, what we found is it's a lot more complex as it relates to the kind of fees and portions of the green card process that we can actually reclaim from the employee. But
is that due to legal? There's legal things saying you can't go and claw back some of this stuff?
Correct. There's a part of the perm labor condition process where we're actually recruiting for the position in the U.S. There's a lot of fees that are tied to that portion of the process. I think it's about $13,000 if memory serves that we can't go back and reclaim.
Wow. So what is $13,000? That's not an insignificant amount of money. What does it cost to sponsor a green card? What is it? I don't even know. What does that cost how do you budget for that? If somebody says, Christian, we want to offer the green card to this amazing talent over here, what is the estimate for that?
So if they are a current H-1B holder and they've never gone through the process before, the total cost of the company is about $20,000. And that goes up depending on if they have dependents as well. If they've already gone through the initial portion of the process, they have their priority date established with their previous employer, but we still have to redo that whole process again. So it's definitely a hefty price tag.
What's a priority date?
A priority date is once they've gotten through that first phase of the green card process and they've established their time in line, they're given what's called a priority date. And that priority date is what's used by the government to say when they are current and able to actually file for an adjustment of status and receive their green card.
Okay, I got it. So you went out, you did a benchmarking, you looked at 3 companies that were similar in industry to you and that you kind of deem as competitors. So that's what we're really trying to do, right? We're trying to say, hey, are we competitive in the marketplace?
Right.
You got this information back. Was it like, what changes did you make at that point?
So at that point, we had to really look at our policy, and say, where are we at? And what it was a case-by-case progression. Every time an employee came and asked, it was a discussion with their manager, it was a discussion with me. And it used to be closely tied to their H1 expiration date. So an H1 has a maximum validity of 6 years. If they haven't gone through the green card process to some extent and received that I-140, then at the end of the 6-year time frame, they either have to split or they're terminated. So in any case, that's used to be what we used to guide our green card sponsorship time frame. But with these changes, we realized that employees didn't want to wait to the end of their H-1B time frame to start the process. So we had to make sure that there was compliance issues. We want to make sure that if we're setting precedents with other policies globally, obviously we have other locations where there's permanent residency that takes place. So we want to make sure that if we're offering something like this in the US, we're also offering it somewhere like in Singapore. And then again, for immigration laws as a whole, we wanted to make sure that our policy was compliant.
This is really, really interesting because this is something I've never had to really get involved with. So I always like to kind of learn about how other people do it. I'd like to hear out there from people who are watching this right now. What questions do you have for Christian around policy? What questions do you have around, using immigration as a talent acquisition strategy and some of his experiences there? Love to know what you're thinking out there. Also hit that like button. Let everybody know that we are on right now. Jamie Massler checking in from Chile, Mississippi. Chile, Mississippi. How's the Mississippi chili, Jamie? David Yakum checking in from San Diego. What's up, David? Good to see you. David's a former colleague. Diane Lyons. Hi, Christian. Nice to see you again. Awesome. So you get this benchmarking data back, and you're like, all right, y'all, this is what the market's doing. You bring it to leadership. Was that a tough sell to make these changes?
Oh, oftentimes, as you know, with mobility, it's not something that a lot of people are fluent with, even in HR. So, even a lot of
even me, I run a mobility talk show, and I'm like, I-140. So, I totally get that.
Yeah, and it was something where we wanted to make sure that there was a value that we're demonstrating, and saying that in almost every case where someone has come forward and asked, the manager highly supports it. They say, this is a very valuable employee to me. This is someone I do want to support. I've had very few times that managers come back and said, no, we don't want to help our employee.
Not that one. Nah.
Right. But then, working with our leadership, there was things that we tied into the policy, like performance. We want to make sure there's a performance component, that the employee's been with us for at least 12 months and that they have a good track record during that time.
Do you look at like performance metrics, like in the way that you look at like employee reviews?
Exactly right. We have a 9-block score, and that typically kind of guides, it's the major metric, but then we also use other metrics in the performance to make sure that we're not only using 9-block. In some cases, employees are kind of in that sweet spot of their employment, but they are a great performer, and we want to make sure we acknowledge those.
Sorry, you got to define for me 9-block score. I've heard of top block. I've heard of quadrants. I've heard of quartiles. 9 is just something how does that work?
It's another performance metric, I guess. A lot of companies use it, but it's like picture like a tic-tac-toe, you know, it's like,
yes, I know how to play tic-tac-toe. I like how you're dumbing this down for me, Christian. I really appreciate this. All right, tic-tac-toe. I got it. Yes.
and it's like, you know, you're basically, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, it's like performance goes across the top. And then I think like, what is it? Is it skills or something? Anyway, they plug you into one of these blocks. And if you're kind of like, you're meeting expectations, you know, like you're in the job that you're doing the job that you're supposed to do, or you're exceeding expectations. You're doing additional work on top of the job that you were hired to do. It's HR is not my functionality either.
So let's assume they're up in the right blocks where they're supposed to be,
right,
and
right.
they're like a great employee, and they've been there for 12 months, and then at that point they meet the criteria so that they're eligible, and then you still have to go to their leader and say, is this someone you want to sponsor? So they're raising their hand. They're saying, I'd like to be considered. And then do you check eligibility and then say to their leader, hey, this person wants to be considered? And
yes, and actually now it's more proactive than that. I'm tracking all of our employees, so I know kind of how long they've been with us, and I know when they're getting to that anniversary date. So I'll be having discussions with those managers before. In a lot of cases, those discussions happen upon hiring. You know, if we're bringing on an H1, I set those expectations up front with the manager that this is what you're going to come to expect in the next couple of years.
This is really interesting. I love the fact you're doing it proactive. I want to know more about that. But Elena has a question. We're going to always prioritize your questions out there. Elena, thank you so much for your question. Elena says, Christian Hall, do you sponsor any new hires for green cards, or do you prefer to see consistent performance first?
Thanks, Elena. You know, I told my director when I rolled this out and we made it a 12-month commitment time frame that I knew before the end of the year we would have exception requests for recruiting. And of course, that happened immediately. And I think we've had at least 6 exceptions that we've approved for different hires where we're offering green card sponsorship from day one.
Okay. Day one. So that's on an exception basis, though.
Yeah, and I just think that right now, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, it's unprecedented. This year has just been nuts. I know my recruiters are all going crazy. I know that the questions that I've seen come through, I can tell what kind of climate they're in with the candidates out there. So we're just trying to put every arrow in their quiver we can and make sure that they're effective.
This is great. And look, in the immigration brains are showing up here. This is what's up, Gabby. Appreciate you. Thank you, John, for tagging Gabby. Tag an immigration friend out there. This is Immigration Day today. And shout out to Gabby and her company. They're going to be doing a special Love and Relo on Thursday talking about Ukraine and the invasion of Ukraine and what's going on over there. So we're going to be digging into the implications there for global mobility standpoint and just kind of giving updates as we have them. Gabby has a great question. Incredible view into corporate immigration life. I'm hearing various companies sponsoring much sooner for green cards than they once did. Great resignation pressures, perhaps?
You know, I think it's possible.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's definitely played into it for sure. But what I was surprised to see is I had a large flood of H-1B holders that I put through the green card process, and we're at various stages. And still we had attrition of those individuals. So, you know, I think a lot of the managers were kind of trying to find flaws in our corporate culture as to why the employees were leaving. And as they kind of got a broader scope of how this was going on everywhere, they saw that it wasn't just a localized issue.
So they didn't feel so bad. Like, it's not you, it's them, it's the market, it's crazy. So I want to talk a little bit about the budget implications here. You know, you talk about the budget, and every time you make a policy change, you know, it's like there's going to be major budget implications. You kind of talk a little bit about the cost of this process. When you went to sell this kind of up the chain, did you have to do kind of an ROI calculation or a budgeting exercise? Because we hear about this in mobility all the time. You know, what's the ROI of mobility? and kind of justifying programs and things and benefits, because that's kind of what we offer. What was some of that kind of homework that you had to do, and what was some of that calculation like?
Yeah, so I had to create a massive master spreadsheet for different components of HR. I had, our direct corporate HR folks. I had international business HR partners around the world that touched the U.S. I had local HR folks. So each of them kind of needed to know something a little bit different about it. The budget was obviously a big part of that piece. So basically with the budget, what we tried to do is show an accrual schedule based off their country of origin. As I mentioned, some countries have a longer wait time than others, and that affects the billing cycle. So I tried to show based off their country of origin when to anticipate not just their H-1B renewals, which need to be done every 3 years, but also their green card costs as they came in incrementally during that time frame. So showing, that first year is about $8,000, once they start that perm process. The second year with subsequent filings, about $2,300. And then once they've reached the end of that wait time, it's about $10,000 to adjust their status.
Wow, it's so interesting. And I'd love to hear from the people out there that are watching this that deal with immigration. Do you have similar accrual schedules? Any suggestions out there on how to structure that and show that from a budgeting standpoint? Also, do you just have general emotions that you want to resolve here on the show? Ben Sukia, I miss you, Ben Cross. Hearts and kisses. Yes, Ben, I heart and kiss you back. Thank you. Thank you so much. I needed that. Gabby, budgeting is so challenging. What a great process. Yeah, is that something you're able to kind of like share with people? I mean, do people ever come to you and be like, hey, because like it's always like kind of the tips and tricks stuff,
Well, I mean, it's in mobility again. I mean, there's a lot of great software out there, but oftentimes, you're typically building something with that provider, and it gets very costly. If you want to customize the programs, and then there's other things like spreadsheets. A lot of us are resort to spreadsheets to track things, and that's unfortunately what I had to do here. But as far as budgeting itself, it's having a good relationship with your immigration provider as well for reporting. That spreadsheet I'm referencing that's available to all of our HR leadership is updated once monthly, so they can see actual costs coming in. They can see what the remaining accruals are. They can share those with the department heads and VPs. It's a great tool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you share it with so many different stakeholders too. I think that's really interesting. Does any of that present privacy issues, or anything you have to consider, when talking about people's information as it pertains to immigration status?
For us, it's all internal within HR, and it's all shared virtually within the intranet. With people given special permissions to view the content. So anyone within the HR realm, is in the circle of trust. And, if they will go and take, maybe they have a group of 10 employees out of that, 125 list, they can have those discussions with their managers if there's topics to discuss.
Hit that like button right now if you are digging this conversation. Throw a little love out there to Christian. It's not just for me. Send a little love out to Christian as well. Christian, I didn't even ask you. One of my customary first questions at the beginning of the show, where in the world are you?
I'm in central Idaho, a little town called Grangeville, which is pretty much the middle of nowhere.
Grangeville, what's the closest airport to Grangeville that you could fly to, like somewhere
somewhere impactful would probably be Spokane.
Spokane. Oh, okay. So that's in Washington State, right?
Yeah, it's right on the border of Washington and Idaho. It's about 3.5 hours north of here.
So are you a Zags fan? You always from Spokane or Idaho? Or you?
No, I'm a world mutt. I've been all over the place, so I don't really have any close ties. This is the town my wife grew up in. So
okay, so you have your own kind of relocation and global mobility journey. It sounds like then.
Definitely, yeah. I moved all over the place. I was in the Army as well, so I moved around quite a bit with them. It's just in my blood.
I got to ask you, how'd you get into relocation?
So I was working at Prudential Mortgage at the time, and I was working in a small faction of that, just switching out mortgage provider information on liens for the insurance division. And their relocation company just built next door in Scottsdale, Arizona. And at that time, Prudential demutualized their insurance, and the Prudential Relo was hiring. So I went over next door and applied for an associate position.
I'm sorry, what is that? Demutualize? Demutualize? What does that mean? Demutualize?
So Prudential sold off their insurance division.
Okay. Okay.
So with that sell, I lost my job basically at Prudential Insurance. So I went over and applied at Prudential Relocation.
Nice. And then Prudential Relocation became Brookfield BGS?
Bristol now. Yeah.
Is it Bristol now? Okay. All right.
So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So going back to this whole green card policy, immigration policy, I want to talk a little bit about implementation. Before we do, though, as promised, always going to prioritize the questions from the viewers out there. Elena Anderson, Christian, could you give us some of your good one-liners for when a case is delayed? Asking for a friend.
I mean, it's not all of them, right? I always blame the government because that's an easy scapegoat, right? Yeah, I think it's sitting somewhere at the USCIS. We should be hearing back soon. Yeah, I mean, they're probably my number one scapegoat for sure.
Blame the government. I love it. That's great. That's fantastic. Jamie Masters got a question. Jamie says, how do you handle budgets and per diem with the quickly changing cost of living and inflation? Allowances that change once the assignee has left for assignment. Ooh.
So for per diems and allowances, typically we use a third-party data provider. We don't always update the tables. It just depends on what kind of assignment they're on and what kind of compensation scheme they're getting. I don't have a lot of per diems. I think I have one or two in Singapore, but those are typically short-term assignments. And once the per diem is established, we typically don't change it because it's a short-term assignment. So for the year or so that it's ongoing, we don't need to change it.
Okay, so you don't change it. So even in a situation like, I mean, here we are in the U.S. experiencing, gosh, I'm not an economist. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody put it in the comments what the inflation rate is, but I've been hearing numbers like 10%. So I mean, even in a situation like that, you're just like, nah.
So I mean, I guess it depends if it's we look at it, is it assignment related compensation or is it like their salary compensation? You know, like is it their actual pay from the company? And if they're working in a location as an assignee, then we're not going to adjust their pay. Obviously, we would make adjustment to their assignment compensation if it's a per diem or an assignment allowance. But again, typically our short-term assignments that receive a short or get a per diem are 6 months or 9 months. So we're not going to change that per diem during that short time frame. If they're on a 3 or 4 year assignment, then we will definitely update their tables, take a look at their compensation. I think our provider alerts us if there is a certain threshold that's breached, if I remember correctly. And if that's breached, then we would probably have that conversation and update the compensation as well.
I got to imagine fuel's a part of that equation. You know,
sure is for me.
You see this? I think we're up to an average price of $4.17 US per gallon or something right now, which is near an all-time high.
Yeah, I just filled up my wife's tank last night, and it was like $90. It's $4.50 a gallon.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I think this is the price. I mean, the way I look at it is this is kind of the price of supporting Ukraine. You know, I mean, because today and we'll talk about this more on Thursday, and we're kind of, I'm getting off track here a little bit, but whatever. It's like when we look at, what does the U.S. buy from Russia? Not much, right? Like maybe potato chips and like, and then oil, right? So it's like all we're buying is oil, and that's their biggest export. So if you really want to put a significant financial sanction on Russia, stopping, oil imports is really it. And so
I agree,
if we want to support, I mean, that's what it's gonna look like. That's what it's gonna feel like, So sanctions are tough, both ways. But I mean, I think it's important. So Mike Falia saying I paid $569 here in SoCal yesterday. Oh, yeah, I hear that.
It's rough.
Dang, Mike, $569.
So rough.
Hey, at least you're buying it by the gallon. You could be buying it by the liter. I don't know if it matters, but it just seems like it'd be more. Mike, how does that impact auto shipping? Mike over here ships cars. Not only does he drive one, he ships them for a living. Curious what you see, how that you see the gas prices impacting the cost of freight and things like that. So Christian, I want to kind of get back to this. So you go out, you do your benchmarking, you realize, okay, we need to be more aggressive in our policies. We need to offer more stuff. You do the math, you come up with the accrual tables, you come up with the the repayback agreements, all the things like that. Let's talk from like an implementation standpoint. Can you give us like a checklist of things that a company has to do to implement a change like this, an update like this? If we have global mobility, managers out there watching this right now, they're saying, gosh, we need to get it, really sharpen our pencil when it comes to this and be able to offer these benefits so that we can win the war for talent, and retain amazing people and recruit amazing people. What is the implementation tactics like for this?
Sure. I think the most important is to have a great immigration provider on your side that can give good feedback, make sure you're compliant with U.S. laws and regulations. The repayment agreement was a little more brutal as far as all the language required in that. The policy, just for benchmarking standpoint, making sure that, again, it's competitive with those that they're going up against. But then, from an implementation standpoint, once you get that policy built and you have that repayment agreement ready to go, you look at a process standpoint. What's the process going to look like? At Itron, we have a business case form, which is just rudimentary information about the employee, kind of the manager's case to highlight, what they feel the employee's contribution to the company is. We have some process flows put together so that, if there's questions, they're able to go reference, what our green card process looks like. We put together PowerPoints for many different audiences. We had our IBHRs, our HR leadership, we had managers, we had employees. So each of them had to be tweaked a little bit differently depending on the audience that they were being shown to. We have reference materials that I had to create for talent acquisition to make sure that they had, bolded, underlined facts to make sure that when they're talking with candidates, they're able to speak intelligently about it. And
super interesting. Yeah, because it makes sense to me that you're creating these resources for existing employees who might have kind of a frequently asked questions document or something like that. But then you also have to communicate this to talent acquisition, who's going out there and having conversations kind of on the fly. I mean, I do this a lot in our recruitment practice, right? We're talking to candidates and we kind of need like a little crib sheet of like, oh, well, this is kind of how it works and everything. And of course, you want to be honest and factual, make sure you get your facts straight, in that conversation, because you don't want to come up down the line when they're about to sign and all of a sudden it's not what you kind of told them it was, right?
Right. No, exactly. And making sure that they're well-versed. I mean, it's obviously kind of self-serving, right? It's less emails that I get, less questions that I get from them. So if they're able to speak intelligently about it, then it's a win-win for everyone. And I think from a candidate standpoint, to be able to talk to that recruiter and have them speak intelligently about, not go into the depths of it, but, just to kind of highlight what Itron does, I think it's key. But as you mentioned, that was another big piece of implementation was our current population. And that's how that beautiful spreadsheet evolved was, trying to estimate, okay, well, out of our visa population, who is now eligible after 1 year, who's been with us for 1 year, what has their performance been? So it was identifying that population and then putting a price tag on it and saying, if we roll this out, the first year, this is about what we're going to pay as a company. And then breaking that down by department to say, you own 500,000, you own 200,000. So there was a lot of logistics going in for the planning. And then, of course, all those materials had to go somewhere, right? So building out the intranet site for Itron so people could go in and access and use them. The training I mentioned, communications, that was huge. Not just sending out emails, but organizing training events. We had some managers that have a very high population of H1 hires. So instead of just sending, a general email that's going to be, probably overlooked, scheduling 15 minutes to walk through it and make sure that they're aware and answer questions that they have.
Christian, I gotta ask. I mean, it sounds like you're doing a ton of work here. So I got two questions.
Okay.
One, how much of this did you have to like kind of create? How much of this did you get kind of support from some of your other, partners in creating?
100%. I've done it all myself.
Okay. All right. That's okay. Good to know. And the second thing is, it sounds like there's been a lot of stakeholders in the organization kind of involved, or who you're like, hey, I need to talk to your group about how this impacts them, and I need to talk to your group, and I need to, host this on the intranet, and I need to, and you're liaising with a lot of different departments and a lot of different leaders and a lot of different stakeholders here. I talk to global mobility folks sometimes who feel like they're on an island, who feel like nobody understands what they do, who don't always feel connected into the larger organization, much, even into their own HR department sometimes, much less the larger organization. How do you build those kinds of relationships and rapport, and that they understand the importance of what you're doing here for them, that they give you the time and the access and the platform to be able to do these trainings and to be able to push this information through their chains? I mean, is that something that was a challenge or not? And how do you navigate that? And what advice do you give to people?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's always better to have a champion at a high level that can, kind of bring it in and help you out. In some cases in HR, it's not always the case. And I think, from just my personal experience here with Itron, it's just been my experience with the people. They know working with me that if I come and bring information to them or a solution to them, even in this case for an unperceived problem, in some cases, that they respect and listen. And, if you're able to provide a good argument, show the numbers. We looked at a lot of retention costs. How much are we losing every time an H1 employee leaves because maybe they got an offer for a job that includes a green card?
How do you quantify that? Give us an insight. Like, what would you put a number, if you had to put a number on a retention cost?
I think we put somewhere like around $45,000 to $50,000 for a lot of these positions. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money, right? And if we're saying it's $20,000 for the green card versus $50,000 to try to rehire and retrain, then obviously it's a no-brainer.
No-brainer, 100%. That's awesome. That's some really good work there. Elena is saying, Christian, have you had issues with perm audits? Did you say perm audits or did you say PERM audits?
It's perm.
Perm, thank you.
It's an acronym.
Big perm. All right, Christian, have you had issues with perm audits and just delays with perm applications?
No, I haven't had any perm audits. I think we've done a pretty good job. I think the majority of the work can be done on the front end, just like any construction job, right? It's all the work you do on the prep. So the job description, making sure it's robust, very robust, and you're capturing all those job skills correctly. And sometimes that's the most painful part of the process, is working with the managers who are already busy and going into 6 or 7 iterations of a job description. When I know I'm starting to weigh on them a little bit. Stuff that
I know what you mean. I ask our clients for a job description when they're recruiting, and they're like, "Oh, can't you just?" And then they send it. I'm like, "Well, I need clarity. Can I set up a Zoom to get some clarification on this job description?" And then they start looking at you. Right? They start looking at you like, "Do you read English or no? You don't? No, not so good."
No, but Atlanta, we've crossed your fingers. We've done pretty good. Just the delays obviously have been with the USCIS and then hiring managers. That's my number one delay, is just trying to light a fire under them and getting those job descriptions in.
Explain to folks out there who don't understand what a perm application and perm audit is. What's a perm application and perm audit?
So what the perm process is basically establishing that we have a role or a job at Itron that we cannot find a U.S. worker to fill, okay. Right? We do this through what's a labor condition. We build out this job description and we say, let's use an engineer, for example. We'll have like 10 job duties and say you need to have a bachelor's degree, which is a condition of an H1. And you need, let's say, 10 different job duties and 6 years experience doing each of those. We'll take that job description once everyone's signed off on it and actually post it as if it's an open position at Itron. We'll have applicants come and submit. I'll review all those applications and resumes. If they're already if they're also an H1 holder or they require US sponsorship, they're automatically not eligible for this position. If they are a US citizen, then I have to go through additional steps. And if they're actually qualified and they meet all of our criteria, the perm falls apart and we have to redo it later. I think it's 6 months we have to wait. But barring that we don't find anyone that's actually meets all of our criteria, then the perm process is complete. We can file it with the USCIS and say, here's our position. Here's a determined wage that has been assigned by the Department of Labor. We're going to now submit for that I-140.
Wow. All right. Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. Let me ask a follow-up question because I've heard different things on this. Do you have to prove that there's not a U.S. citizen who can do the job before you go overseas?
In some countries, that is, I know that they do. I think like Australia is one that I've seen it where we've had to do a recruitment to show that we didn't have or they couldn't find someone there. I don't know of other countries that I've worked in recently where we've had that requirement, though.
Okay. Elena, I'd love to know your thoughts. Gabby, I'd love to know your thoughts, too, on that. I've heard some differing opinions, and I'm kind of from the outside. We also have a global fuel update, Christian.
Oh, cool.
So not only did Michael pay $5.69 in SoCal, he also says in 27 years in the business, I've never seen transportation costs and fuel charges this high. Ray from Vancouver says our cost per liter is 2.01. Ray, I love you, man. 2.01. How many liters in a gallon? Somebody help me with that math. I'm trying to convert that and compare that to Mike over here in SoCal. And then Jamie says, I've been following the cost of products in Russia since the sanctions have been put in place. I love Jamie. This is great. I already love this comment. I don't even know what else he's going to say. I just love this comment already. A liter of gas converted to gallons costs approximately $1 to $2 per gallon USD, depending on octane levels. But the average yearly salary in Russia is $6,500 USD. Doing that math, it is extreme. So they're paying way less than we are. How much has that gone up, Jamie? Was it like 50 cents and now it's $2? I mean, give me an idea of pre-sanction, post-sanction. I'd love to also do the math with the average salary here in the U.S. and let us know what percentage of our salary gas is now. Thank you. If you could have that math done by the end of the show, I would appreciate it. Isn't this great, Christian? We just get to like talk to people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You haven't always been in immigration per se. I mean, you kind of have a relo background, right?
I do, yeah. I worked at Relo for a long time. I was with Ascendant Mobility, now Cardis, out in Mission Viejo for a spell. Worked with Lexicon out in Jacksonville. Worked with Grangeville in Atlanta. Yeah, kind of worked the circuit in the third-party relo sector as well.
Wow. So you don't look old enough to have that many companies that don't exist anymore on your resume.
Right.
You really don't, man.
Thanks, Ben. I'll take that.
When did you get in the business? How old were you when you got into Relo?
I was pretty much right out when I got out of the Army. So I think I was 21, 22.
Okay.
Back in, it was just after 2001.
Nice. I got to start taking care of myself, man. This guy over here looks like he's 27. Mike says 3.78 liters in a gallon. Golly, Ray, that makes your gas really expensive. That makes it almost $8 a gallon in Vancouver. And Ray's in trucking. Interesting. So besides your all the work you've done with green cards and things like that, and the policies at Itron, tell me a little bit about, from a relocation standpoint, what are some of the challenges maybe or things that you've done over the last couple of years as kind of things have changed due to the pandemic and other factors?
Sure. We've changed quite a bit and leaned more toward a lump sum approach for U.S. domestic moves. We still employ a traditional managed program for our senior level, director and above. We have kind of a lesser policy or tiered policy for, manager level or someone that we want to offer more than a lump sum to. But right now, really, we've kind of gone with that lump sum mentality because it just seems like it's gotten them more bang for their buck as far as what they need to make the move happen. But we still stress, for a managed move, for the senior level moves, we want to make sure that they have a good experience, that they're not tied up on the phone their first week with the movers, things like that. We want to make sure that they hit the ground running.
So is it like a lump sum, or is it like a managed lump sum? Like, do you give them like a list of providers, or kind of like pre-vetted folks that you recommend, or is it truly, just kind of go out to the market and see what kind of a deal you can get with your money?
We have all of the above. So the lump sum program, it's just a lump sum, and then we have vetted suppliers that they can work with. And then we have managed move as well with our RMC, and they give them the typical, BVO, household goods, temp housing, all that stuff. So they get kind of the two options. And then I think for a lot of times with the recruiters, we have like a lump sum plus program where we'll offer a lump sum plus temporary housing or plus household goods or plus home sale in some cases, where we'll just take care of the home sale and reap the tax rewards there, and then give them a lump sum for the other incidentals.
So it's kind of like a core MEA, core flex, like with some core benefits and some cash. So okay, so and is that up to the discretion of the talent acquisition person, or something that they can kind of change based on the like does it come down to, I'm talking to a candidate, and this person, it's obvious to me their hot button is household goods moving, or their hot button is, temp lodging for 30 days. So I can offer that, and then I can offer them some cash over here, or is there a preset set of core benefits?
Sure. Yeah. And in that arena, it's totally flexible. And that's exactly why it was created, was to give flexibility to the recruiters and the hiring manager. If they saw a managed program was going to cost $60,000 and they say, I only have 20 that I can allocate toward this, we wanted to give them an option as well. So in some cases, I'll intervene with the recruiter. They'll bring me in if there's a special circumstance and say, what do you think we should do? Obviously, everyone at a certain level and up, I give a managed program to, or unless they have crazy circumstances where a lump sum's better, I typically recommend they get the managed move.
Yeah. You've been doing this for a while, Christian, and you've seen kind of both sides. You've seen, from the RMC side, you've seen from the corporate side at Itron. What's something that you're kind of thinking about, or you're kind of looking at, that you don't feel like maybe we're talking enough about, or you're kind of, thinking about and kind of turning over in your head a little bit?
For me personally, it's the flood that's coming right now. I've seen so many delayed relocations the last couple of years, where we know someone's going somewhere, but they're still home. And we know, and that's globally. I can call out at least 30 people that I've talked to in the last year that are just kind of on hold, waiting for the world to open up. So what's on my mind has been, what's going to happen when the green light actually gets lit, and going through that.
When do you think the green light will get lit?
It's practically there for me. From my experience and what I've seen, like the last 6 months to like right now, our hiring is up, our relo is up, our new visa transfers are up, everything's up. So I don't know. I'm remaining optimistically hopeful that we're there, but we'll see.
Yeah, and what is that green light going to be based on? Like, is it going to be based on return to office? Is it going to be based on business needs? Is it going to be optional? It's like, well, you've been like relocated, but not for so long. They're like, do we start to question whether or not they actually need to go to destination? What is some of that discussion like from your perspective?
Yeah, I have I think a quarterly report that I have with payroll of updates on this kind of population that's waiting to move. And that's the question for me is, have they moved? Have they moved? And I have to go through this list and go through each employee's record to see have they updated their home address yet. It's just kind of silly stuff, but it's these weird things that we come through in Relo and mobility where we have to like be creative and we have to customize things and we have to be able to innovate and say, here's a need, how do we fill it? And really we look at our programs based off noise levels sometimes and say like, where's the most noise? Where do I need to spend most of my time fixing things and where are things going okay?
Yeah, running a program off noise levels. I feel like that's so true. I feel like people don't really admit that, but it's so true. It's like, am I hearing noise or not? Like I talked to Jack and I talked to some various people, right? And they're like, if I'm not hearing noise from the business that I'm supporting, is it broken? And if it's not broken, why am I going to go about trying to fix it? Why am I going to create problems where they don't exist, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that we should probably be more honest with ourselves. Like that is kind of a lot of times the way the business is run. I mean, I think sometimes on the supplier side, if I were to speak on behalf of suppliers, it's like, we're always wanting to push for innovation. And like a lot of times that's code for like, hey, let me try to sell you something. And our client partners are like, I'm not hearing a lot of noise in that area, so that's not really a priority right now. So come check back with me in 6 months, which is usually code for like 2 years, and we'll see. We'll see if there's a need then. How do you know when something's like it's time to evaluate something?
I guess I just have I'm touching everything, right? So like I'm in every move, every employee that's transitioning, I know what's going on. So you just pick up trends, a great example, and I won't call out names, but I had a lot of issues starting to stem from one interaction with a coordinator at a certain company. And the perception at the higher level was we need to get rid of this company. And it's like, no, from my perspective, I saw what the problem was. It wasn't the company as a whole. It was that one coordinator. So by able to focus in on that and eliminate that one coordinator and get someone better on the team, it fixed the whole relationship.
So we don't need to fire the company. We need to fire the coordinator.
Right. So it's like, how much time did I just say procurement, HR for presentations, all the dog and pony shows, like we didn't need to change our provider. Our provider was fine.
That's so interesting. That's really interesting. I wanted to know, you had kind of a question for me about kind of supplier networks. And Stacey, can we throw that up? Because Christian actually had a great question for me here going into the show here. And let's throw that question. Christian, what was your question for me going into the show?
It was just that, like around, now that the floodgates are starting to open, I'm in my own silo, my own cave, so I don't know what's going on a lot of times out there. Like, what trends are you seeing? What's like RMCs, supplier networks? For example, temporary housing's the hot button right now because housing's so hard to find. Mm-hmm. So it's like, are you seeing other kind of trends like temporary housing right now where people are moving around?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think we've seen, we've seen more evolution in this area, I think, over the last couple of years than we've seen in the last, I'd say 5 years before that. Corporate housing is a great example. The requirements from the clients for corporate housing have been really fickle, because we've gone from in 2000 and for 2020, COVID almost put the corporate housing industry out of business. To 2021, it was like, you're going to go from being almost out of business and having to explain to these apartment buildings why you can't pay their bills, to 2021, like, hey, we need you to come up with all sorts of capacity in the second half of 2021. The lights just kind of turned on, and now all of a sudden we need all these like 3-bedroom apartments everywhere. Meanwhile, most buildings, like 5% of the building is 3-bedroom apartments. Right now, everybody wants a home office. Right. Everybody needs pet friendly units because everybody got a dog during COVID. Right. By the way, because people have a dog now, they're like, that's one of the biggest reasons I'm hearing that people don't want to return to office. It's because now they have this 1-year-old puppy that they can't, that's not trained. That's like, I can't leave, Fido at home. It's like, I'm hearing this a lot. I heard this from a chief legal counsel, general counsel for a very large company. She's like, we got a dog and I'm never going back to the office. And I'm like, wow. It's so real like that. So you're seeing the dog, you're seeing 3 bedrooms, you're seeing, them wanting to extend their stays now because now they're they relocated and now they're like kind of hunkering at destination, but they're still not returning to office. But they're kind of in this situation where they're there for a longer time. So now 9 month stays, year stays. So that's kind of interesting as well, which just also puts further constraint on the corporate housing market. So I think you're seeing a lot of demand for single family homes. You're seeing a lot of demand for townhouses. You're seeing a lot of demand for more space and bigger units, which is really interesting because I think prior to that we saw a lot of millennials not getting married was kind of the thing, right? And so they'd stay single in these places, and these affluent millennials would need these 1 bedrooms in these sweet neighborhoods for so long. And so I think that the market built up to that need, and then all of a sudden it just pivoted on a dime. And so prices are going up like crazy. And then you're seeing a lot of apartment buildings, for instance, especially in these cities that got stuck with these leases, not wanting to re-rent to corporate housing. So not only are they have like near zero occupancy, but they don't even like corporate housing providers anymore because they stuck them with so many leases a couple of years ago. So they don't need them and they don't like them, which is a real problem for corporations who need that corporate housing supply and also that duty of care that they provide, all those cute little gift baskets that make employees feel special and everything, right? So there's that, right? And then the last thing is these auto shippers just keep getting more and more handsome. Thomas Bailey, that's another friend of the program out there. So I think that's between him and Mike Falia, really missed their calling. What needs are you seeing from the business? How is the needs evolving? Because the supply chains are really just adapting to meet the needs of the business. So what are you seeing?
Really, the needs of the business have kind of stayed the same all through COVID. Is what's your crystal ball tell you? When are things going to be open? When are people going to move? And I really haven't seen that huge wave hit from the dam bust. But again, that's kind of what I'm fearing, and I hope all of our providers are ready for the storm.
Yeah. And I think we're getting more ready. I think one of the things from a moving standpoint that's helped is last year the corporate moves and the COD consumer moves both went crazy, and the COD moves actually paid better than the corporate moves. So when there was only so much space on the truck, there was getting allocated to the COD moves because there's price elasticity in the COD market. So you're seeing COD moves booked at like a 40-something% discount, whereas corporate moves, are 40 to 50% discount, whereas corporate moves are typically like in the 60s now, low 60s maybe. And so they just weren't getting space on trucks. And what's interesting this summer, I'm hopeful for our corporate clients because we're seeing the housing market cool a little bit. It's still pretty crazy. We're seeing it cool a little bit. Also because prices are getting so astronomical and now interest rates are starting to climb. So I don't think you're going to see nearly as many transactions on the COD side. I think there's going to be a lot of corporate volumes there. But it should at least mean corporate transferees have a better shot of getting serviced. So I'm hopeful about that. At least. Yeah, we're almost out of time, but Christian, this has been fascinating talking about immigration. Hit that like button if you've enjoyed this conversation with Christian Hall at Itron. Christian, do you want to leave us with maybe just a final thought, a piece of advice for our audience today?
No, I think, as a lot of companies are looking at diversity and inclusion right now, this is a good population that we should include in that. And that's what I kind of showcase to my leadership. They do create a great workplace. I love the people that I work with. So I think for corporations out there that aren't employing a lot of H1 or foreign nationals, you're missing out on a nice untapped resource.
You're 100% correct. I just had this epiphany, frankly, today. One of my team members, Jana Shazanowski's in Brazil, and they talk about how diversity makes a company stronger. And a lot of times it's in very unpredictable ways. But, she has access to amazing talent pools down there that I would have never had access to. And so we're actually going to bring on a vendor that she discovered down there in Brazil, right? That I would have never had access to. So I agree with you 100%, Christian. And that's a great thought to leave us with. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It's been wonderful talking to Christian, learning so much about the green card process and policy ideas. Stay with us this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we, again, have that special episode on Ukraine on Thursday. That's going to be wonderful. And that's at a special time of 12:15 Central on Thursday. So see y'all there. Christian, thank you again.